Our main presenter tonight is Charlie Loeb, who has owned electric vehicles since 2016. His family presently uses an electric car, an electric bike, and Lane Transit District buses to meet all of their transportation needs. He has a professional background in transportation, including a master's degree in regional planning from Cornell University and a certificate in sustainable transportation from the University of Washington. A former resident of Alaska, much of his transportation work centered on Denali National Park and Preserve, including the park's bus system and transportation connections to surrounding communities. You're in for a treat tonight. Charlie, take it away.
All right. Thanks so much, Phil. Delighted everyone is here to talk about electric vehicles. Just a couple of Zoom tips before we get started. There are, at least on my screen, there are an awful lot of squares with names of the people who are participating here. If you really just want to see the speaker, in the upper right-hand corner of your Zoom screen, there's a little thing that says View, and you can click on View and choose Speaker View, and then you will have just the person who is speaking. In the lower left corner, if you haven't already, hit the mute button and the stop video button. If you could do that now, that will just help minimize distractions while other people are talking. We have so many people here that if we all had our video and audio going, it would be quite noisy. Deborah, I do see your message, and I have no idea why you don't have sound. I think everyone else is hearing us okay. And I would suggest it's something with your system. And finally, I'd like to point in the middle of the bottom of your Zoom screen is the chat box. And I'm going to ask everyone to, if you have questions as we're going through the initial presentation, to go ahead and just type your question in the chat box, and then we will get to that at the end. We've got enough people here tonight, and we're expecting more to be joining us, that I think you will, to begin answering questions, we will first sort of go through the questions in the chat box and make sure that those get answered. So feel free to see that. If you don't see the chat box in your Zoom screen right now, if you just point sort of toward the bottom with your mouse toward the bottom of your Zoom screen, that should pop up. And now I am going to start the presentation here. And with any luck, you all are seeing my screen. Does everyone see, Phil, does everyone see a PowerPoint there?
I see one.
Excellent.
I'm seeing the whole thing, so you may want to hit your
yes, I'm about to start it. Yep. There we go. All right. Sorry, just adjusting where something's sitting in my way on my screen here. All right. So REVUP. REVUP is the product of a partnership among several different organizations, as Phil mentioned, all of which have in common a desire to encourage people to use electric vehicles, which includes the City of Eugene, EWEB, University of Oregon Office of Sustainability, and then the Emerald Valley Electric Vehicle Association, which Phil introduced earlier. I'm going to spend about 35 minutes on an initial presentation here, and then we are going to have an opportunity for those questions you're typing in the chat box to get answered. And we expect to spend quite a bit of time with those questions. So my presentation should be seen as a stimulant to thinking about what you need to know about electric vehicles, and then we will try to make sure you get that information before you leave here tonight. We're going to talk about these subjects during my initial presentation. Why go electric? What are the benefits of electric vehicles? What are the differences between ICE and electric vehicles? I'm going to use that acronym quite a bit. ICE stands for internal combustion engine. It's a gas or a diesel powered engine as opposed to a car that runs, or a vehicle that runs on an electric motor. We're going to address cost considerations. We're going to talk about things that may make you nervous about owning an electric vehicle, including the range of vehicles, how you go about charging them, the batteries and how those work. We'll talk about things that save you money. That's something that everyone wants to hear about. And finally, we'll get to the question and answer, where I'll be joined by a couple other people that will help me answer questions. So first, I'm going to narrow the field a little bit here. The term electric vehicle actually refers to several different kinds of vehicles, including a hybrid electric vehicle, which actually is primarily a gas or diesel powered vehicle that runs on liquid motor fuel, but has an electric motor too, and a small battery that is charged from regenerative braking, from the energy generated by braking action. And that electric motor provides a supplement to the gas-powered engine or diesel-powered engine to get more efficiency out of that engine and help you go further on less fuel. The Toyota Prius is the classic version of one of these vehicles. You've seen those around. They're ubiquitous in Eugene. They've been around for about 20 years. That's one kind of electric vehicle. Plug-in hybrid electric vehicle is the next step along the path toward full electrification. This also continues to have the gas or diesel tank, has a bigger battery, and both an electric motor and an internal combustion engine. And that bigger battery can be charged by plugging directly into a wall socket, and then that electric battery can take you that electric battery with the electric motor can drive the car some distance without needing to burn the gas or diesel. Typically, these cars will have an all-electric range in the teens or 20s in terms of the amount of mileage it'll get before that internal combustion engine kicks on. A few, like the Chevrolet Volt, will get up into the 50-mile range before turning over to the traditional engine. I'm actually going to spend most of my time this evening talking about this third one, the battery electric vehicle. This one has no gas tank, has no internal combustion engine. You charge up the battery and then run the car on an electric motor. And the reason I'm going to spend more time on this car is on this version of electric cars, because this is the unfamiliar terrain. Most of us are pretty comfortable with the idea of driving a hybrid electric vehicle or even a plug-in hybrid vehicle, because in the end, we can always use it like we would any other car. Things change a little bit when you get rid of that ICE engine altogether and begin driving all electric. So we'll be focused mostly on the battery electric vehicle. I did want to give an honorary mention to the fuel cell electric vehicle. Another version of an electric vehicle runs on an electric motor with a battery, but the initial fuel that you put in your car is hydrogen, and a fuel cell converts that hydrogen into electricity to make the car go. This is a different technology. It's been in development for a while, but still hasn't really reached mass market, certainly not here in Oregon. You will find a few commercially available vehicles in other parts of the country, but the hydrogen fueling infrastructure is not here and the vehicles themselves are not here. So we're going to focus on the battery electric vehicle. Now, that means cars like the Chevrolet Bolt in the upper left-hand corner, the Nissan Leaf in the upper middle, the Tesla, which everyone has heard associated with electric vehicles there in the bottom middle, and other cars or vehicles that are designed for personal use, like the much-awaited electric pickup trucks, which are not quite here yet, but they're coming. We could be talking about another set of vehicles for personal use that we aren't going to. And these are the small vehicles that have been enabled by electric power to perform feats never before thought of, for electric bikes or scooters, the one wheels you'll see zipping around town occasionally, Segways, an older technology. And then, of course, our very own homegrown motorcycle class vehicle, Arcimoto, that's manufactured right here in Eugene. So depending on your need for electrified transportation, one of these might well suit your need, but we're going to be talking about personal vehicles, cars, trucks, rather than covering some of these micro-mobility devices as they're known. So let's talk a little bit about the benefits of electric vehicles. And to begin with, we have to talk about carbon. For those folks who are interested in an electric vehicle because they are concerned about the environment or the changing climate, the impact on carbon emissions is an important piece of what they're thinking about. And as it turns out, in this area, in Eugene, Springfield, Lane County, the amount of carbon from transportation choices that people make is quite significant. The City of Eugene recently completed their second version, Climate Action Plan 2.0, in which they put out this graph, which shows in the City of Eugene where principal sources of carbon dioxide are coming from. And you can see that big gray area at the bottom. That's the amount, that's the portion of carbon dioxide coming from transportation. This is a time series graph starting in 2017, projecting out to 2030. But in 2017, 53% of carbon emissions in the City of Eugene came from transportation. Transportation is a significant opportunity for reducing carbon emissions. And because our households mirror to some degree what the whole city is seeing, it means that if we can reduce the amount of carbon in our transportation, then we can make a real contribution to reducing gases that are causing climate change. Of course, everyone wonders, well, what about the source of the electricity that you're having run the car? If you're burning fossil fuels to produce the electricity, is there really any gain? Well, certainly here in the Pacific Northwest, where much of our power comes from hydropower, that's not really a significant question. This is a map put together every couple of years by the Union of Concerned Scientists. And what it shows is how many miles per gallon your fossil fuel operated car, your ICE car, would need to get in order to produce less carbon than running off of electricity, running an electric vehicle. And you can see here in the Pacific Northwest, your car would have to get 102 miles per gallon in order to have less of an impact on carbon emissions than driving an electric vehicle. By comparison, looking across the country, you can see some places better, some places worse, but almost everywhere it is going to make sense to drive an electric vehicle rather than an ICE vehicle. Maybe in the Midwest, you could probably find in places like Wisconsin or Michigan, places where the power is dirty enough that you could find a more efficient gas-powered car. But that's changing rapidly. There's more and more renewable energy coming into the grid. As I said, Union of Concerned Scientists does this every couple of years, and these numbers keep going up. It won't be long before there is nowhere in the country that is competitive in terms of carbon emissions for internal combustion engines versus electric vehicles. And I suspect that here in Eugene, we do even better than the Pacific Northwest as a whole. So much of our power in Eugene comes from hydropower, like EWEB's Carmen Smith hydroelectric project up on the Mackenzie River. And in fact, EWEB recently produced an electrification impact analysis report, came out just this August, where they looked at the carbon emission equivalent per year in their service area between ICE vehicles and EVs. And what they discovered was pretty remarkable. ICE vehicles produce vastly more carbon emissions than electric vehicles here. And you can see on the graph, and the takeaway quote on the right-hand side, I think is really powerful. Each new EV that replaces an internal combustion engine in EWEB service territory translates into a 2 3/4 metric ton reduction in annual carbon emissions. That's significant. This is something that if the environmental impacts of carbon emissions are something that is important to you, driving an electric vehicle is a way to make a significant difference. Now, of course, the carbon is only one environmental benefit that you might get by switching to an electric vehicle, because there are many other environmental problems that have long been associated with the oil and gas industry and with driving cars operated by internal combustion engines. There's toxic waste in production of oil and gas. There's oil spills in transportation, the Exxon Valdez up in Alaska being one of the most famous. There's air and water pollution from refining. There's noise pollution caused by having all those little explosions going off in your cylinders to make vehicles go. There have been many human rights issues associated with oil and gas production around the world. And I put this one last, tailpipe emissions, just because I think it is a tremendous issue that would have, even without carbon, would make it worth thinking about switching away from oil and gas. The American Lung Association recently put out a report in which it said that switching to zero emission transportation technologies like electric vehicles could add up to $72 billion in avoided health harms, saving approximately 6,300 lives and avoiding more than 93,000 asthma attacks and 416,000 lost workdays every year. Just because of the air pollution, avoiding the air pollution that comes from burning gas and diesel in our cars. There's huge reasons beyond carbon to think about switching away from oil and gas. Now, that's not to say that electric vehicles are completely without their own environmental harms. There have been concerns raised in the battery industry about toxic waste in production. There's certainly, if you're not using hydropower, air and water pollution from electricity production. There are issues around battery disposal, and there have been human rights associated in mineral-rich areas, associated with mining in countries where human rights protections are not strong. So these are things we should remain definitely concerned about. And I would have to leave it to you to weigh which of these technologies ends up producing more harms. But to me, it seems like the weight goes in favor of environmental vehicles, or in favor of electric vehicles, even leaving out the carbon emissions and the difference in carbon emissions between the two technologies. But there are also other benefits from driving electric vehicles. For one thing, they are extremely quiet. In fact, they're so quiet that they talk about having to add noise to them to help people who are sight impaired or not paying attention at crosswalks to know that the electric vehicles are coming. These cars have instant torque, and so making for really fast acceleration. The cars have only one gear, so when you step on the accelerator, you get instantly all the power that car can provide. It makes for a very zippy, a very fun drive, even on cars that look like they're small, have very small engines and would take quite a while to get up to go 0 to 60. If it's an electric car, it will get there very, very fast. They have a very smooth, low vibration drive that is just a pleasure to experience when you're driving an electric vehicle. Electric vehicles are considerably more efficient than their gas-powered counterparts. When you're driving a gas or diesel-powered car, only 16 to 25% of the energy input actually goes into powering the car. The rest is just wasted. It goes out in engine losses, a lot of heat, energy gets dispersed instead of being used to power your car. There's various losses in the drivetrain and so forth. And by comparison, in an electric car, you lose a little bit in charging the battery, a little bit in your accessories and drive system, but the power to the wheels, the energy you put into the car, 69 to 73% of that energy actually goes into making the car go instead of just 16 to 25% in the ICE car. Not only that, once you use the regenerative braking technology, you're able to actually rope back in another 17% of the energy you've expended, making the car overall 86 to 90% efficient, which is just a great way to, a great technology for getting the most out of the energy input. Another benefit of electric vehicles, simplicity and maintenance, simplicity of the car and its parts, simplicity in taking care of it. If you have an electric car, your maintenance chores are going to be reduced to changing your wiper blades, making sure your wiper fluid's topped off, changing your cabin air filter, keeping an eye on the tires, making sure they get rotated and don't get too much wear. There is some motor coolant, and you do have to think a little bit about brake pads, though not nearly as much. Really, you use the regenerative braking system of the car to provide most of your stopping power, and you rarely have to ride on the brake at all. And you can say goodbye to all of these kinds of maintenance we're so used to. There's no air filter in an electric vehicle, no fuel filter, no oil or oil filter, no fuel injectors, pumps, spark plugs, alternator, power steering fluid, radiator, hoses, timing belts, water pump. All of this is not a part of an electric vehicle. In fact, the whole drivetrain of the electric vehicle is about 20 moving parts as compared to like 2,000 in a standard internal combustion engine vehicle. It's much, much simpler to take care of and much less expensive. Speaking of less expensive, the operating cost of electric vehicles are much lower. EWEB recently did a study and found that the fuel cost for an electric vehicle is much, much lower than for a comparable internal combustion engine in the service area using electricity purchased from EWEB. You can see that it's about a quarter of the cost. And unsurprisingly, based on what I just said about maintenance costs are much lower. Consumer Reports just put out a publication in 2020 following a survey of car owners that showed maintenance costs for electric vehicles are half of what it would be for a comparable internal combustion engine vehicle. So your operating costs are considerably lower for an electric vehicle compared to a conventional vehicle. Now, of course, electric vehicles at the moment do often cost a little more for a comparable car or car at this point. If you wanted to get a handle on what your total cost of ownership is going to be, purchase price of the car and all the maintenance and fuel and service cost, there is a handy tool, and I'll provide this link to you at the end of the program. Comes from the U.S. Department of Energy and Alternative Fuels Data Center, and it allows you to plug into up to 8 different cars to compare. You can tell the tool what you're paying for the car and plug in information about how you drive, how many miles you're going to cover, city, highway, and then it will show you how those cars compare in total operating cost over 15 years. Now, to get something very comparable between an EV and a non-EV, I'm going to look at a Hyundai Kona. It has both an electric version and a gas-powered version. So it becomes really interesting to compare the two to see how they stack up on total cost of ownership. And here it is. And you can see the blue line is the EV, the red line is the gas-powered car. And there's one thing you can't change, which is unfortunate, which is they do assume that you are going to make a 10% down payment and have a 5-year loan. And for that reason, initially, the EV is going to be more expensive and get more expensive as you pay more in interest over those first 5 years. But then those cheaper operating and maintenance costs really kick in. And the EV over 15 years costs just a little bit more than the gas-powered vehicle. And then you would have to look at this and decide, well, is that worth it to me? Is it worth it to me to pay a little bit extra in order to gain the environmental benefits because I like the drive quality better? Whatever your personal calculation is, much like you would decide whether to pick any other amenity about a car. I did leave one thing off, though, which is there are federal and state incentives for purchasing the EV. And those are not included here. Once I take off a federal and take advantage of the federal tax credits and the state rebates, this is what the chart looks like. In fact, those lower the cost of the Kona EV to parity with the gas-powered version. That you taking advantage of the maintenance and operating cost, and the EV actually ends up being cheaper than the gas-powered version over the course of 15 years. So there are the benefits of electric vehicles. Let's talk about things that may make you nervous. And the thing that makes most people nervous is the range. How far is this vehicle going to go before the battery dies and I am stranded somewhere? Used to, a lot of the earlier models of electric vehicles would only get 80 miles, 90 miles of range. But as you can see from this table of cars from the 2020 model year, that's improved considerably. While the Nissan Leaf gets 150 miles on a full charge, the Nissan Leaf Plus is up to 226. That Hyundai Kona we just talked about, 258 miles on a full charge. And then it keeps going up. Chevy Bolt, it even gets another mile of range above that. And then the Tesla Model S, you can see up there, 348 miles of range. deciding, evaluating the range of a car depends on one important thing, which is how you're going to use the car. And let me illustrate. This was my first electric car. We got this 2016 Chevy Spark EV back in 2016, and it had an 80-mile range. But it was a second car for us. It was the car that we used for in-town commuting, for quick runs to the grocery store, and my wife used it to go to work every day. But it didn't need to go very far. We would occasionally drive it, to Cottage Grove or up to Coburg or somewhere, but we never had a need for it to go more than 80 miles because we had another car at the time, a gas-powered car that we used for any trip that was longer than that. And this car was perfectly adequate for the need we had at the time. Our needs have changed after 3 years. This lease ran out. We ended up getting rid of both cars and getting one electric vehicle with longer range that also meets our need, but in a different way, different need and different car that makes it work. So whether the range of an electric car is going to suit you depends on what your needs are. Things that make you nervous: charging your EV. Of course, the range is only, we don't really spend a lot of time thinking about the range of our gas-powered cars, though they have a range too, because we know we can refuel them. Well, likewise, you don't drive your car until the battery's dead, and then that's it, one charge. You will have plenty of opportunities to charge your EV. And in fact, I should have mentioned at-home charging as being one of the real benefits of electric vehicles, because that is something most people do, is charge their cars at home, never having to go to a gas station. You're able to get power from right where you're at. 3 levels of charging I'm going to talk about. The first one, level 1 charging, is just simply plugging your car into a standard electric outlet, 120 volt outlet like you have all over your home. This is great, very convenient. But one disadvantage is it can be very slow. 4 miles of range added per hour. Now, if you're only going 30 miles a day or so before you come home to recharge, no problem. Plug it in for 7 or 8 hours overnight. It's ready to go in the next morning. If, on the other hand, you have a car that has 259 miles of range and you get home and the car battery is fully depleted, well, you can do the math on that. For charging it up at 4 miles per hour is going to take quite a while to get it back to full charge. But there's another solution for that home charging. Level 2 charging. Level 2 charging runs off of a 240 volt power source, kind of like much like your electric clothes dryer, if you have an electric clothes dryer at home. The charger is actually built into the car, but you typically acquire an electric vehicle supply equipment. You can see the box kind of hung on the wall there behind this car. This communicates with the charger and on the car and figures out how much charge to deliver to take best advantage of that onboard charger. Those onboard chargers typically run 3.6 kilowatts up to 20 kilowatts. The more kilowatts you get, the quicker it takes to charge. Typical is around 7.2. That'll add about 25 miles of range per hour. So suddenly that car you drove for 200 miles today, you can once again get charged just by plugging it in overnight using one of these level 2 chargers. Another great thing about level 2 chargers is they are found frequently all around your community. Unlike a gas station, which requires a lot of specialized equipment, it's relatively easy for organizations to businesses to install their own level 2 chargers for the convenience of their customers, guests, employees. So for example, Lane Community College has this great solar powered charging station out there with a whole bank of about a dozen level 2 chargers. The Lane Regional Air Protection Authority, downtown Springfield, put in a charger there just out front. Anyone can stop and use it. And there are many businesses and agencies and retailers who are deciding to put these level 2 chargers in as a perk for, as I said, customers, employees, and others. How do you find them? Well, like many things these days, there's an app for that. PlugShare is a very commonly used one, very popular. you will pull up a map of where you are. It will give you a little icon showing you where all the chargers near you might be. If you click on one of those, like I clicked on the Lane Community College one down in the lower right corner there, it'll pop up information and tell you what kind of chargers are there, whether you have to pay to use them or not. If they are networked, they will actually show you, the app will tell you whether or not the charger you're aiming for is in use right now. So you'll know whether it's even worth showing up, whether there's someone sitting there or not. This is very handy. These apps are very handy, helps you find where the charges are. As they become ubiquitous, it may not even be as important, because we may reach the day where you can count on, no matter what business you pull into, there'll probably be an electric vehicle charger around somewhere. Now, what happens if you're traveling? What happens if you've got a car with a range of 240, 250 miles, but you're on a trip that's going to take you 400 miles in a day? There is a solution for that too. There are DC fast chargers organized in networks around the country and around the globe now. Now, DC fast charging goes much faster than those level 2 chargers. You remember I said 7.2 kilowatts was kind of the oomph you'd get out of one of those, a typical level 2 charger. These DC fast chargers will go 50 to 350 kilowatts. The goal is for the charger to get your car up to 80% charge in an hour or less. Now, the DC fast chargers have a couple of quirks. One is, while all the level 2 charge connectors are standardized now, it's not true of the DC fast charger connectors. There's 3 different ones. The CCS, typically used in North American and European cars. CHAdeMO, which is more of an East Asian connector. The Nissan Leaf predominantly uses this, or entirely uses this. And then Tesla has their own charging connector and technology. As I said, it's also way more expensive to put in a DC fast charger than a level 2 charger. It's not something you have at your home to be able to deliver this kind of energy punch. So there are charging networks like Electrify America, Blink, EVGO that put in these DC fast chargers. You can usually show up and use them just with a credit card at the pump, much like you would in any state but Oregon, where you go up to the pump yourself, plug the charger into your car, put your credit card in, and begin charging. Though if you join one of the networks, then you can also just pay them through your app. I should mention too that Tesla has its own proprietary charging network. So if you're purchasing a Tesla, you will pay careful attention to their own apps and where their charging network locations are. Another app for locating chargers that I like when traveling is called Chargeway. And I like this app for a couple of reasons. One, you can plug your own car in to the app. Here I just sampled doing a BMW i3, and you can tell it to just identify, say, fast chargers that I can use, and so these circles show you what level of fast charger is available. 4 is a 50 kilowatt charger, which is what the BMW i3 can use. So I could use that. I could also use a 6 or a 7. They'll deliver more electricity. The 6s will deliver 150 kilowatts, the 7s 350 kilowatts. If I plug a BMW i3 into it, I'll still only get 50 kilowatts. It matters if you're driving a car that has 350 mile range, and you would find that the 50 kilowatt charger might be a little slower than you were anticipating for getting your car back up to a full charge or to an 80% charge. Chargeway also allows you to plug in a route you're planning to travel, and it will actually identify where you should stop along that route in order to do your charging. So one last thought on charging. One of my collaborators on this project made a very good point while we were talking about it, noting that EV charging is something you worry about a lot before you buy an electric car and hardly at all afterwards. We all pretty quickly adapt to the rhythm of charging the car, whether at home or on the road, and your habits may change a little, but then it becomes just normal to plug in your car at home when you notice the gauge is looking a little low. or you think about planning a lunch break during a day's journey while you're traveling around where your DC fast charger location is. The new fueling's better and more convenient in some ways, like the charging at home. A little less convenient in others, like charging while traveling, but in the end, it's really mostly a change in habit that matters. One last thing under things that may make you nervous, your batteries. I'm going to touch on these very quickly. Safety, will my batteries catch on fire? There have been a couple of well-publicized events where this happened and a couple of recent recalls, but in general, electric cars have proven at least as safe as conventional vehicles. They're subject to the same rigorous testing, and there's actually and oversight by federal agencies. There's special protocols they have to go through with batteries to make sure they're not going to blow up, or that people are going to keep people from electrocuting themselves on them. All this is considered in approving these cars to be on the market. And there's no real evidence that electric vehicles are proving any more hazardous than conventional vehicles. A lot of folks worry about longevity of their batteries. How long will these batteries last? And this is always a concern, and any of us who've used rechargeable batteries of any kind for a while would think that this is something worth being concerned about, and it is. However, the evidence is proving that these modern batteries are very resilient. This is just from a sample from Tesla Model S's and Model X's, showing battery degradation over time, or actually over mileage that the vehicles are driven. You can see it goes out to about 250,000 kilometers, which is about 150,000 miles. So in the first 150,000 miles, you can see that the batteries in general lost a little bit of their oomph over the course of that time, but only very, very gradually. There are some outliers, like the one back there at the 75% level near 0 kilometers. That was clearly a problem battery, but that would be covered by a warranty, just like any other thing that went wrong on your car. And in fact, every car manufacturer selling in the US market right now warranties their batteries for 8 years and 100,000 miles, and some warranty them for longer than that. While this is this graph is particularly for the Tesla, other manufacturers are showing similar results. Last issue on batteries, recycling. What happens to expired EV batteries? And this, I will say, is a bit of a work in progress. There are a lot of folks at the manufacturers and elsewhere looking at solutions for what to do with used batteries when eventually they do degrade and eventually need to find some path to disposal. I would say right now that for the relatively few batteries that are coming out of EVs, they're finding that they are still useful for stationary applications. So it might not hold a charge well enough to drive a car, but it'll still work fine for backup power, emergency power, energy storage. And so that's at least where some of the batteries are going now. Their life as a battery doesn't end when their usefulness in a car expires. So to summarize under things that make you nervous, first, figure out how you're going to use the car, where you're going to go, what other car or vehicle or transportation you may have in your life. And then you really only have to think about 4 things regarding EVs that are different than what you would think for your conventional car. You want to check out what the range of that car is. You want to know what the level 2 onboard charger capacity is so that you can figure out how long it takes to charge a depleted battery up at home. You'll want to look at the type of DC fast charge connector and how much power that fast charger can take. And that's really it. We covered all those things. It's pretty simple. We can answer more questions about that as we move into question and answer in a little bit. Beyond this, choosing an EV is much like choosing any other car. You're concerned about passenger seating and cargo space. And amenities, those things that you would typically think about when picking a car. So let's talk a little bit about things that save you money. And here I'm going to speak specifically to incentives. Best known is the federal tax credit. You can get up to a $7,500 federal tax credit for the purchase of a new battery-powered electric vehicle or plug-in hybrid vehicle. Now, it's somewhat less for a plug-in hybrid vehicle, diminishes depending on how much all-electric range that car gets. And the credit does phase out after a manufacturer sells more than 200,000 cars. So, for example, BMW i3 right now, you can, if you bought one of those, you would qualify for the full $7,500 tax credit. A Ford Fusion Energy, which gets about 26 miles all electric range, that maximum tax credit's only $4,600 in a bet. For a Tesla Model 3, you don't get any tax credit at all. Tesla sold more than 200,000 cars, so they have phased out of this program and aren't eligible anymore for the federal tax credits. Now, it's worth knowing to take advantage of a federal tax credit, you actually have to be paying federal taxes because it's going to be deducted from your tax liability for that year. And it does have to be used the same year that you get the car. So the credit may not work for everyone, but for those who pay more than $7,500 in taxes and are buying a car that is still covered under the program, it can provide a significant incentive for your purchase. The state of Oregon runs a couple of programs. They have the $2,500 Oregon Clean Vehicle Rebate Program for a new battery electric vehicle, diminishing to just $1,500 for a plug-in hybrid electric vehicle. And then the $2,500 Charge Ahead rebate for new or used battery electric vehicle or plug-in hybrid electric vehicle. For the Charge Ahead rebate, it's designed for lower income households, and so you do have to meet an income threshold requirement, but it's very generous. It's 120% of, 120% of median income for your the nearest metropolitan area. I ran the numbers for Eugene, and it, depending on the size of your household, it comes out somewhere between 75,000, 77,000 of household income you can earn and still qualify for this credit or for this rebate. Now, it's important to keep in mind, these are rebates, not credits. So generally, it's something you have to fill out paperwork for and submit to the state in order to get your rebate. Some dealerships have qualified to provide the rebate at point of sale, but it's most cases you're going to be filling out rebate paperwork in order to claim this. Finally, you will find local incentives for purchasing EVs. So, for example, there's the incentive you qualify for just by attending this workshop. Kendall Chevrolet is offering you a $1,000 discount off their lowest advertised price on a Chevrolet Bolt. Lithia Nissan offering also $1,000 off of a Nissan Leaf from their lowest advertised price. Both these are short-term, designed around folks who come to this workshop thinking they're ready for an electric vehicle. They expire on January 1st of 2021. Another place that you can often look for discounts or deals is at your local utility. For example, right now, EWEB and EPOD are jointly promoting this Charge Your Ride program. They are certifying EV dealers, and if you go to one of these dealers and take a test drive in an electric vehicle, you can be entered to win a $250 cash prize just for doing the test drive. If you register your purchased or leased EV with one of these utilities, they'll give you $100 just for registering your car with them. In addition, both are offering incentives for installing one of those level 2 chargers at your house. $500 rebate from EWEB, $750 rebate from EPOD it was offsetting the costs for installing that charging equipment. So we've covered the benefits, things that you may be worried about, and some of the financial incentives for investing in EV. And now it is time to answer your questions, and I've left a lot of room to ask questions. And as before, I will direct you to the bottom of your Zoom screen in order to type some questions in the chat box, and I'm going to be going through the chat box and picking those questions out and starting to get them answered, but I'm not going to answer them by myself. I have accompanying me, and I'll ask you guys to turn on your cameras if you want. We have Juan Serpa Munoz from EWEB, Al LePage, who's our technical expert from EVEVA. Al is one of the people who helped found this organization. He's the vice president, and he recently completed a certificate program in electric vehicles and has a lot of knowledge that I don't, at least. Steve Curtis, I still have his name here. I should take it off. He unfortunately got trapped traveling today and is not able to be here, but did say that he would, if there are questions on the tax credits or incentives, that he would be available to answer those electronically. We just have to send him the questions, and then he will provide us the answers if it's something we can't answer here. And then we also have two salespeople from Kendall Chevrolet who are here in case you have specific questions about the Chevrolet Bolt. Andrew Brown and Brandon DeVera are here. And with that, I am going to end my show and see if I can get back. And for some reason, let's see here. Phil, there's something that you did once before. Oh no, I've got it now. I'm good. All right. Yeah. Phil, could you do me a favor? I think I am not. Zoom is not giving me back all my controls, and so I am not able to stop sharing my screen. But I think maybe if you have a way of stopping my screen sharing, that I will get my control back.
Very good question.
Do you see a way to work? This
do that.
Was a problem once before, and then it wasn't last time, and now I am like dead in the water here. I am not. Oh, that's interesting.
Boy. Oh, here it is. There.
Perfect. There we go.
Yeah, I had to find the right button.
All right. All right. We're there. I see there are a bunch of questions lined up in the chat. Thank you all so much for being here. And we will run through the questions. Let's see. Let's see. The first question from Andre: what is your current EV? The UO charges people for using their charging stations. Does LCC share too? And let's see. I'm currently driving a BMW i3. Which is the reason I was using it as my demo on the ChargeWay app. Other members of the Emerald Valley Electric Vehicle Association own electric vehicles across the spectrum, from Teslas to Bolts to Leafs. We have perhaps the entire spectrum of possible EVs represented among our membership. In terms of which the UO, noting the UO charges people for using their charging stations and asking about LCC, that really completely depends on the organization that installed the charging station. But an app like PlugShare will tell you whether or not there is a charge involved in using any particular station. And I see an expression of disappointment in how few chargers the university has installed to this point. One thing that EVEVA is working on is getting incentivizing more employers, retailers, and others to install charging stations. So we would like to see those become more ubiquitous, and I think they will. I think they will on their own, but it's worth, if there's a place that you feel needs a charger, it can be worth just approaching. If it's your employer, if it's a place you regularly shop, it can be worth approaching them and say, hey, I would be more likely to use your service, stay working, whatever it is, if you provided this benefit of having an electric car charger installed here. Does level 2 charger have to be mounted inside a garage? From Veronica. And no, you can install a level 2 charger outside. I believe they probably are. And maybe I'll let Al answer this. I believe that they probably come rated for either indoor or outdoor use. Al, do you have thoughts of that? Does a level 2 charger have to be mounted inside a garage?
No, it does not. They make chargers that you can mount inside and you can mount outside garages or outside your house. So external and internal.
All right. One thing I will say about that, if you live in an apartment, this is one of the more thorny problems for EV owners, is if you don't have good access to charging capability. That's something else that, you may not be in a place where you can install your own level 2 charger. You may have to convince your landlord to do it. And this is something else that EVEVA is working on in terms of coming up with some state policies for making sure that people living in apartments or condominiums or such have the ability to charge their electric vehicles. So how much would it cost? So from Ingrid, how much would it cost to fully charge your vehicle on one of these DC fast chargers? And I would say that depends, because different companies will charge you different rates. And maybe I'll just take a quick poll from a couple of people who are on this call. I rarely use a fast charger myself. I am able to do virtually all my charging at home, and I haven't paid much attention for the few times where I've traveled with the car and needed to fast charge. Phil, maybe you could give us an example for charging up your Tesla, and then
Sure. I'd be happy to do that. Tesla advertises its rates, and they're different in different states. In Oregon, the Tesla fast charger supercharger rate is 28 cents a kilowatt hour, about 7 cents a mile for a Model 3. There's several questions about charging costs, and let me say that the main thing to be aware of is that most of your charging, assuming that you have capacity to do it at home, will be done at home. The vast majority of electric vehicle users charge 90% of the time at home. So that depends on what your electric rate is. And Juan can tell us for sure what that is, but my recollection is about 9 cents now per kilowatt hour, about 3 cents a mile, or a little less than, I got a thumbs up, a little less than 3 cents a mile for a Bolt or a Tesla Model 3. Most of the others also get about 4 miles per kilowatt hour. So you will pay more on trips, but since that's a very small part of the fuel that you buy, for most people, it doesn't amount to much.
All right, thank you, Phil. And I think that is the key. It's certainly like those figures I showed you earlier in the presentation. With much of your charging being done at home, you're going to end up paying quite a lot less overall, even unless you're charging at a fast charger every time, which is not something that many people end up doing. Let's see what other questions we have here. From Wanda, how much do the batteries cost? And that is something you don't have to worry about. The batteries come as part of the cost of the car, and so you're paying for. And you don't you don't switch out the batteries generally. I don't think we've gotten to the point where people are buying entirely new battery packs for their cars, and it's something you wouldn't have to worry about even if you started with a new car now for probably a decade or more, if ever. Al, do you have any thoughts on that one?
I did see the question from Wanda, and I did send her a link about the actual cost if you really did it. But basically, what you just said, Charlie, makes total sense. I mean, I'm not hearing about people having to replace their batteries and going in. Mm-hmm. And I will tell you this, the federal mandate for 8 years or 100,000 miles, that gives you some protection, obviously, right? And then, on top of all that, there's what's called hidden, unwritten warranties. When Nissan Leaf did the first Leafs, the cars down in Phoenix, Arizona, for example, were frying the batteries. And so what they did is they just replaced the batteries free of charge for people because it was young technology. So those are what I call the hidden warranties that really aren't typically present. So I hope that answers your question.
Could I add that battery costs are declining rapidly? And so the battery in the car, I'm making up a number now, maybe it's $10,000 for the battery as a part of the price of the car when you buy it new. When it's time to replace it, you may want to junk the car because the car will be pretty old by then. But if you don't, the price of a new battery will probably be a whole lot less than the $10,000 because the prices are coming down rapidly.
The other thing, Al LePage here, the other thing is that you won't necessarily, let's say there was an issue with your battery, right? Which is the whole thing. It's made up of individual cells. So you could just go in and have individual cells replaced, which would refurbish the battery. So, and that's a lot less than replacing the whole battery. So you shouldn't really think of an electric car battery as like one big dry cell under the car. It's like a lot of little miniature dry cells all connected up. That's all.
Yeah,
All right.
Let me add too that, you know, people who don't have these cars worry about this question. I've never heard of anybody needing to replace a battery except for one that was improperly manufactured, or one like the ones that Al was referring to that fried in the Phoenix heat. And those are very, very unusual. The possibility of the need to replace a battery before the car wears out is pretty low, I think.
All right, thank you all. Next question from Newt. Can I program my charging profile to make the best use of renewable energy, whether solar, electricity, or wind, so as to help adoption of renewables by our communities? And down below, I see Ruana responded, being retired and under lockdown, I charge my EV battery when the sun is out to use my solar power before it's sent to the local utility. Most of the time it works out very well. Yes, and often I believe many cars come in a way they're programmable so that you can choose when to charge. Usually that's done to take advantage of lower electric rates at night in places where there's differential charging options, and rather than specifically to take advantage of solar production. Juan, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so currently EWEB doesn't have a time of use rate, but there is the benefit when you charge during non-peak times, which tends to be, if you think about it, when people are using the most energy, which is around 5 p.m. or so. So you come home, most of Eugene comes home, at least with COVID, it's a little bit different. But people turn on their heating systems, gets busy around 5. So if you can imagine all the energy that is being needed at that time, and a utility has to provide you that energy no matter what. We cannot say, hey, sorry, we can't give you energy for your heat. But what happens is with all that energy, and although EWEB has a 90% carbon neutral portfolio, then you start putting a strain on that system. And at this time, that is not the case, but as more EVs come online, then you are now looking at more dirtier fuels to provide that energy. So it's very helpful if you're able to shift that charging part at a later time, say like 8, 9 p.m., 10 p.m. And if you happen to have a level 2 charging station, which EWEB provides you $500 towards, then because you're getting about 20 plus miles an hour, it's not a difficult ask to say, hey, move your charging to a later time, because you can quickly recoup those miles that you need. Again, at 20 miles an hour, and in Eugene, maybe you drive 40 miles on an extremely busy day. But even if you went to Portland and back, at 20 miles an hour, you can make up those miles quite quickly. So there are benefits, not necessarily financial at this time, because we don't have a time of use, but it's environmental, because we're able to allow for that clean energy to be used during off-peak times.
All right, thanks, Juan. There are a few more questions here. Just to forecast a little bit where we're going to go from here, I'm going to get a couple more questions answered. I want to make sure you all get to see Andrew and Brandon here from Kendall Chevrolet, in case any of you are shopping for bolts. And we got one more poll for you, and then I'm going to pull up a slide with some resources on it that for all of those of you who have more questions, then we'll stay on the line and keep answering questions, but I do want to provide an opportunity for those who need to get off to go. I did want to answer, before we do that, I did want to answer just a couple of more questions here. And then we'll go back and make sure we get all the rest done after we kind of have a wind up. Karen Mason asked, does each DC charger have a different connector, and how do you best negotiate the fact that there are 3 different types of connectors for DC chargers? And the answer to that is that, so there are just the 3 different types, Tesla, CCS, and CHAdeMO. And if you own a Tesla, you're going to be mostly using the Tesla supercharger network. If you own one of the a car that's not a Tesla, then it's worth being aware of whether it's CCS or CHAdeMO. In most cases, the new fast chargers stations that are being put in have both a CHAdeMO connector and a CCS connector. It's kind of like pulling up to a gas pump and you have a choice between gas or diesel, and you know which one to pick to put in your tank. And so it's the same thing. That said, right now, and I expect this to be only temporary, but right now there are places where CHAdeMO connectors are more common, where before, when Nissan Leaf was the main car out there, they worked with some of the charging companies and made sure there were places for Nissan Leafs to charge with CHAdeMO connectors. If there are places you regularly go where you need access to a fast charger, it might be worth checking what the connectors are that are available. In 3 years, it's probably not going to matter at all. There will be many more fast chargers, and they will be equipped with both CHAdeMO and CCS. And then this last one, I'm going to throw this one to Al. I should say last, and then a break, and then we'll be back for more questions. But from Susanna, I heard that fast charging is not good for the battery, and you should only do that a few times. Is that true? Al?
Okay. In a sense, it is. Yeah. In terms of battery longevity, what the studies have shown is that if you charge and recharge the battery within a smaller range of around 50%, it lasts longer. And the more you go further out from that, the battery longevity decreases. So basically, I have a Chevy Bolt. It's got about 7,000 miles on it. And believe it or not, I have never fast charged that vehicle. So I do level 2 charging a lot, but you know, the reality is these batteries are pretty resilient. And so, you know, if you were driving from here, say to maybe San Francisco, and you just kept fast charging, that's probably going to be a little tough on your battery. Okay. But in general, you know, it can help battery longevity by not supercharging it. And by the way, people that do own Chevy Bolts, they're looking at the battery now, so you don't want to charge it above 90% because apparently some of them have caught on fire. So they're still trying to figure out a fix on that, but right now they're telling Chevy Bolt owners, just charge to 90% and you should be okay. Okay, so the fast charging can be a little tough on the battery.
Yeah, well, and I should say when I think Al's referring to driving to San Francisco, like if you're doing that repeatedly, like that's your regular thing that you're doing day in and day out. There are plenty of people who do cross-country trips in their electric cars and are using fast chargers along the way, and it's long time repetitive use of fast chargers that could cause the deterioration. And again, it's always, you know, your conventional cars lose some of their capability too as you drive them more and more. It's one of those things. It's a piece of wear and tear. It's just one kind of wear and tear that's unique to electric vehicles. Let's see. I want to just introduce Andrew Brown and Brandon if he's here. If you all just want to say hi, and that if anyone's interested in taking advantage of the deal at Kendall Chevrolet, these are the guys you would look for. Andrew, you want to say a couple of words?
Hey, everybody. Hey, by the way, Charlie, that's a phenomenal presentation.
Oh, thank you.
I have one question that I wanted to answer from the chat, and it was from Heather, who mentioned anything about incentives being carried over into the 2021 year. So we aren't going to control the federal tax credits and incentives. However, dealerships' incentives are going to change month to month. That's just the way that it is. They could get better. They could get worse. We don't know. So just throwing that out there for anybody who's thinking about it now. It's December. We have really great incentives. I thought Albert had a very good point on the battery life. A lot of people are concerned about the battery life, but in 8 years, 100,000 miles, the way that technology is changing around the EV market, people are more than likely going to be trading in their vehicles around that time anyways for the next available model. So if you're really considering keeping the vehicle for that long, you can just replace a cell, extending the longevity of the battery, which could, in the long run, save you a lot of money as opposed to replacing an entire frame.
All right. Hey, thanks so much, Andrew.
Thanks, guys. Hey, keep in mind, you can come down and drive a Bolt EV and get entered for a drawing for, what was it, $250 from EWEB and
That's right.
the Drive Forth program.
Kendall Chevrolet is one of the certified dealers that is participating in that.
Yes, sir. Thank you guys for having us.
Sure.
Andrew, is your dealership certified to offer the state rebate right off the top?
Yeah, the Oregon Clean, absolutely. We are.
Right, so people don't have to send off to the state and wait for a check. You can do it right there.
No, sir. We act as a one-stop shop to connect you directly to the DMV and all sorts of rebates and incentives that those vehicles qualify. So you can also check out those on our website. If you head your way over there and look at the new Chevy Bolt EVs, especially the 2020 models. We haven't quite seen 2021 hit, but you know how this is. Everything's kind of slowed down. That being said, everybody go ahead and take a look at those things. So that way you can see exactly the breakdown on some of the different rebates and incentives that are being offered right now. And you can see an accurate price point.
All right. Thanks, Andrew.
Hey, you're welcome.
And I see Brandon there too. Hey, Brandon. He's the other representative from Kendall here.
Yeah, now I'm unmuted. Hey, guys.
Right.
Hey, I just had to download it on my phone. My computer audio wasn't working.
No worries. Good to just wanted to give people a chance to see you. Know that there's a friendly face there, Kendall, to look for if they head on in for a Bolt.
Oh, awesome. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Sure. And I'm going to just share my screen again here briefly. Let's see here. Oh, did that work? I'm not sure that worked. Do you all see my screen? My PowerPoint
Yes, it
screen?
worked.
Okay, good. It's not working the way I expected it to. I do see some questions from Ingrid and other people that are still coming up. I'm going to get to those, but because I know we will have people dropping off here, there are a couple of things I wanted to do. One is I wanted to let you all know that there will be a follow-up email coming to you with links to various resources that you can use to get more questions answered. It'll have information about claiming your $1,000 discount if you go either to Kendall Chevrolet or Lithia and Nissan. And it will provide some of the information that was available in the presentation. The questions and answers won't need to stop here when we're done for the evening. We will have information available at the Emerald Valley Electric Vehicle website, www.eveva.org. Someone asked whether this presentation or the slides would be available. And if you give me a day or so, I am going to get a recorded version of this up on that website, and you will be able to look under the events page there and be able to watch this whole thing. There are a couple of great services that you can get very personalized assistance for getting questions answered regarding electric vehicles. At EVEVA, we have a program we call Ask an Owner. You write this email address, askanowner@eveva.org. If you have a question about a specific car or in general, we'll match you up with one of our experienced members who knows the answer. Oftentimes, the questions we get are about particular models of cars. We will find, we know who our members are who own those cars. We'll put you in touch with them so that you can ask questions of someone who has experience with the particular vehicle you're thinking about. EWEB and EPOD are working with Forth, a nonprofit up in Portland, on several cool programs, one of which I already mentioned, but I want to mention this one, another one called Electrifies. And the website address is here. It'll come in the follow-up email. And Electrifies will provide you with a personal EV consultant. If you contact them through this website, they will help guide you through the EV purchasing process, help you compare cars, and figure out whether they'll meet your needs or not. Another awesome resource. If you need information about EVs, if you have questions, there are lots of places to go. I'm going to come now wrap around and finish answering the questions we have here now. But Phil, I wanted you to pop up that other poll. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Once again, I would like to stop sharing my screen, but it's not giving me that option. Phil, if there's a way you can boot me off of there. Yes, perfect.
I figured it
Why don't you
out.
put up our other poll here?
Launching poll. Here we go.
Quick answers.
Um,
Did we provide you the information you need to understand EVs better? If you all could just give us a quick sense for how useful this was. All right. Cool. I think some people had already dropped off the call. We're winding up, but I'm seeing some yeses. There are at least like maybe 20 people or so actually came out of this feeling positive, and that's great. And if you all feel like emailing us any feedback, you can send it to reveup@eveva.org. And we would, we appreciate any information you can give us if you were in the none of these column, for example. All right, Phil, do you want to show the results of that? Or end polling and show the results? All right.
Can you see it? Can you see the results?
Al or Juan or someone who
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, the results are there. I see them.
Oh, good.
Yay. Thank you.
Good. Well, you can see, Charlie, that you've got 5 people who are going to run out and buy an EV tomorrow, and 16 who are very likely to look for one soon.
Excellent.
That's pretty good out of the 24 who responded.
Well, I'll take that as this being at least a little bit helpful. And with that, if I'm going to keep answering questions, feel free to stick around. We will keep chatting for probably at least another 15 or 20 minutes here while we try and take care of all the questions that are online here at the moment. And I see a question from Ingrid. Great info. Can't take notes fast enough. I think I already answered that. Coming up on the website. Just give me a day or two. Ingrid also asked, how much do those superchargers cost for the home? So we wouldn't call those superchargers. We would call those level 2 chargers. And there is both a purchase cost for the EVSE itself, and then an installation cost, which usually requires hiring an experienced electrician. It seems like this question came up quite a bit at our last workshop, and the conclusion was it'll probably cost in total under $1,000. You can think roughly $500 for the equipment, roughly $500 for the installation, but highly variable depending on your particular need for the installation. And there are the supply equipment has, there's a range of different models you can have there. The great news is that if you are an EWEB customer or an EPUD customer, they'll offset about at least half of that with a rebate. So it's not going to cost you in the end as much as the sticker price for installing one of those level 2 chargers.
Charlie, could I add that
Yes.
it's very much dependent upon your situation. And many people can get by with a level 1 charger, as you already pointed out. They're just one of the utility plugs in the garage or near the outside of the house. But it pays to get a licensed electrician come and look at your situation and see what needs to happen in order to get it installed. When I installed my first charger, what it amounted to was a plug-in, and it cost $100, including the plug-in, for a level 2 charger. And that was, that was my situation. Other people's will be very different.
Great, thank you, Phil. And it is true. And I almost got in a situation where I was going to need a service upgrade to the panel in my garage, which would have been vastly expensive. And we were able to squeak in with just enough power with what I had. But definitely worth getting someone out to look at your particular situation and give you an estimate. Lisa asked, are there electric SUVs, any different considerations when looking for an EV SUV? I would say that their SUVs are more coming than here, but they're very, very close. There should be some coming out in the next model year, but I wouldn't think, those 4 things that I pointed out that are different about EVs, the things you may worry about, range and the DC fast charging capability and so forth. You would consider those as the same as you would for any other electric vehicle. And then it's just what kind of car do you need? If you need an SUV, an electric one will do what you need it to, then I wouldn't think there would be anything otherwise exceptional about it. Anyone else have an opinion on that? Betsy asked, what does a new battery typically cost if you do have to buy one? There probably is no typical because you don't typically ever buy a new battery. Al, any thought on that?
Yeah, apparently Nissan actually has a program where they refurbish it or something like that, or they can take the battery and reuse it in storage, electrical storage units. Maybe something like $5,500 is what I saw online. And, but as Charlie said, and as I've said, rarely do we see batteries being replaced. I mean, you don't read about it on the news. You really don't hear about it from electric car owners. And, the Nissan Leafs have been around for quite a while now, since the early part of this last decade, really. So, worrying about the battery burning out is not something you should worry about. Also, when a battery's getting to a point where it's degraded, maybe it's still operating at 70%, right? So like the Chevy Bolt gets 240 miles, right? So what's 70%, say, of 200? That's 140 miles. You're still going to get, 140 miles of charge on a battery that's now putting out at 70%. My point is, don't worry about replacing the battery. That's it, really.
All right. Thanks, Al. Let's see.
Really, can I make a comment? I raised my hand.
Oh, sure, Rana. What would you like to say?
So I want you to know that to date, the Nissan dealership has never done a brake job on a Nissan Leaf. So I wouldn't worry about the batteries when they still have not done a single brake job.
That's a very interesting. As Al said, Nissan Leafs have been around for a while. That's pretty impressive, and that is because much of your braking is done using the regenerative braking system. You're putting power back in the batteries while your car slows down. And it does become, I think, a bit of a game for electric car owners to see how little they can use their brakes. Like I find myself doing that. It's like, where do I take my foot off the accelerator so that I will coast to a stop at this stop sign?
Generally between 12 and 4 miles an hour. But do always look in the rear view mirror and make sure you're not about to get rear-ended, because there are people that don't pay attention.
I do tap my brake on occasion just for that reason.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Rana. Let me look at Bailey Payne's question here. You work in Corvallis. One of the barriers to installing more stations is the concern about tying up parking. Do you have any resources to demonstrate what local EV projections are? Local EV projections might be hard. There certainly are lots of projections now for where EVs in general are going. And Bailey, what I think I'll do is try to pull a couple of those and send them to you offline. We would have your email from your registration, and I will send you something on that in case it's helpful while you're arguing for more EV slots there in Corvallis.
Can I add a comment to that The legislature, when I was there, passed a really neat statute that really elegantly takes care of the issue for the guy who owns the parking space. And that is this: if you want to restrict that parking only for electric vehicles, you put up a sign that says that. Only for electric vehicles while charging. If you want to be able to continue using that space for other parking, in addition to having it available part of the time for electric vehicles, you simply don't put up the sign. And it works. The idea then is so that someone who owns a parking lot is more likely to be willing to put in electric vehicle charging, knowing that they don't have to tie up the space when there's no electric vehicle there.
All right. Thanks, Phil. Joan asked, do extreme environmental temperatures affect the performance of EVs? I'm thinking of Arizona in the summer or Alaska in the winter. This is probably another Al question. I will just say that yes, sort of, a little bit, but I'll let Al give more details there.
Well, basically hot weather, really hot, like Phoenix, Arizona hot, okay? That is not good for the battery, all right? Does it affect the performance? No, it doesn't. But when it gets cold outside, yes, that does affect the performance of the battery. They don't get as much range in really cold weather. The beauty of living in Eugene is we're not really cold like northern United States, and we're not really hot like the Southwest. So we live in a nice climate area for electric cars, okay? I will say this for the Chevy Bolt, it says once the temperature is above 90 degrees Fahrenheit, plug it in so the battery can be conditioned and cooled down. And this summer when it went above 90, I parked it in the shade of a neighbor's tree down the street. And then I drove it home when the temperature went below 90. So basically, it doesn't really affect the performance unless it's cold, There you go.
All right. Thanks, Al. It looks like Andrew's getting ready to answer the next question, which is I am
actually before that, Charlie. I apologize for cutting you off. Was going to add an anecdote. One of the trainers from Chevrolet came in to talk about the Bolt the other day and said that basically Chevy had produced a test run to simulate an 8-year, 100,000 mile battery limit at the Death Valley in California, where it has the most extreme highs and the most extreme lows throughout the entire year. Throughout the course of that simulation, the Bolt battery only varied 72%. So basically, it brought down to a 72% of max capacity to where it would normally be 100. So in those extreme highs varying like that, that's when the battery undergoes the most stress. And I can only speak for the Bolt. Unfortunately, I don't really know a whole lot about the other model of vehicles. But the stress tests conduce that they only lose about 18% of their overall charging ability, or I guess 28%.
Right. Hey, thanks, Andrew. Stay online there because I'm going to ask you this next question. I will say I lived in Alaska a long time, and a friend of mine got one of the early Tesla Roadsters and drove it regularly around the state. And I believe there was the extreme cold will take something off your battery, but it was still very usable. And this question is from Heather. Any chance that the local dealers can extend their incentives into the 2021 tax year? 2020 created lots of business personal income losses that may diminish the federal tax credit impact. In other words, people may not have enough income to take advantage of it. Andrew, as EVEVA, we can't speak for what the dealerships are willing to do. Andrew, how does that work from your perspective if someone wanted to try to claim this $1,000 further into 2021?
Well, it's very difficult. So that's the thing that we, obviously we would have to talk about with general management at the head of the company. Now, from what I can tell you guys about all of the manufacturers' incentives and rebates that are going on right now, they do vary by a month-to-month basis. So I know that they don't go away, but typically they either go up, they go down, or they stay the same. Now, what I can tell you is that Chevy and many other electric vehicle companies are gearing up for a large push. I can't guarantee anything, but I can say that Chevy Bolt customers should be incentivized for a very long time.
All right. Thanks, Andrew.
Nah, thank you. You're welcome.
Veronica asked, are there features such as navigation that you cannot get in an EV? And my immediate inclination is to say that this is no, the answer is no, that in fact EVs tend to be rather techy because they have a lot of techy systems involved in battery management anyway. Does anyone, Phil or Al, do you have any perspective on this?
Well,
What's the question, Charlie?
Go ahead.
The question is, are there features such as navigation you cannot get in an EV? You know, and I think all the sort of amenity stuff is really, that's kind of unrelated to what's making your car go. And my sense is that EVs tend to be pretty techy.
Yeah, my quick answer to that would be, don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, most of the manufacturers that are selling conventional vehicles are trying to keep up with Tesla, which has pretty much everything you can think of. And of course, all of the electric vehicles have much better systems for measuring how much energy you have left in the battery than the gasoline-powered cars do, simply because of the nature of the charging system versus ubiquitous gasoline stations. So we know much better what our range is with an electric car than you do with a battery-powered car. Navigation systems, I think all of the battery-powered cars have very good navigation systems, including the capacity to tell you where the next charger is likely.
And Charlie, and Andrew, you're probably going to like this answer. Chevrolet, I think they put so much money into the development of the Bolt from the ground up, I think my guess is, this is just an opinion, they were willing to lose money on the Bolt because they're actually working on all this technology, which they're putting into all their other cars. Okay, so in terms of navigation, I'll tell you, just as a real quick aside, I've been driving a 1988 Volvo, okay? And this is like going into the space age for me, where I can know in real time by pressing something on my dashboard what my air pressure is in all my tires, okay? And if you're connected with OnStar, if someone steals your car, they'll be able to find it for you. They'll know just where it is with the GPS. So in terms of navigation, boy, the potential for them to just upgrade software to even make it better on the Chevy Bolt, for example, any electric car is there. So I think the navigation is excellent, frankly, on the electric car and the potential. That's it.
All right. Thanks so much, Al. Rana asked, can you share about winter battery range versus summer range? Rana, I think we already kind of touched on that. I'm not sure Rana is still on the call. There is some loss of range in winter, but it's not dramatic. Andre asked, can you discuss pros and cons of leasing versus buying? And I'll take this one because I lease, and I lease for one reason, which is that the technology is changing so quickly on these cars. It's kind of like what buying a computer used to be back in the 80s and 90s, when you hated to buy one because it was going to be obsolete in a year, if not 6 months. And electric cars are kind of like that right now, where anything you buy now, if you lease now for 3 years, you can probably get for the same price something with triple the range 3 years from now. That's kind of what I did with the Chevrolet Spark, which I then got a replacement for 3 years later, actually at double the range. For those who can lease, for leasing is an option, I think it's not a bad way to go. There are advantages, disadvantages to leasing versus buying in general. And so I'm only going to highlight this one that I think is particularly pertinent to electric cars. And other than that, I'm not really qualified to give advice. The one other thing I will mention, and just because I think Al was pointing this out to me earlier, that If you're not going to qualify for the federal tax, if you can't make use of the federal tax credit, if you lease the car, that the dealer is actually going to, or the manufacturer is actually going to take advantage of that tax credit, but it goes into determining the price that your lease is based on. So you can get that tax credit worked into your the value of your lease if you lease rather than buy. If you wouldn't benefit from the federal tax credit, you could still, by leasing, benefit from it on a lease basis.
Because the car belongs to the leasing company.
Exactly.
And they're the ones that bought it. Exactly.
Right. Thanks, Phil, for helping. I got bungled up there. I was not sure I was clear. I hope that was helpful. Let's see here. A lot of just great. Thanks for all the positive feedback here, everyone, which is mostly what's coming up now. Let's see. Newt, since this topic fits into the broader question of energy choices for our community, it seems that touching upon the whole house, even briefly, would be a good idea. There are a plethora of other efficiency choices that might make more sense than an electric car, and for some, they've done everything, so the electric car is next. We all want to be a part of the solution. Oh, this is just a statement of the importance of considering other things you can do for your household or your lifestyle that would be environmentally beneficial. And with that, I think I've exhausted the questions that were on the list here. Oh, wait, no, Evan just popped a couple up here. Is it safe to plug in the rain? Can an extension cable be used to plug in? And what are the etiquettes of unplugging someone at a public charging station? All right, so the first two I'll do very quickly. And one, is it safe to plug in the rain? Yes, in designing all this equipment, the manufacturers are aware it rains. And it's not an issue plugging in the rain. Can an extension cable be used to plug in? No, and really, it's not clear like how you could even get it. These cables are big. They're not like a well, I guess for plugging into a 120 outlet, like if that's the question, if you're plugging in at home and just want to plug into a 120 outlet, I guess I am not qualified to answer that. It's probably okay. Al, any thoughts on that? Before I turn it on to Al, I just will say, for the level 2 chargers, there aren't really extension cables. So you've got whatever cable length came with your supply equipment. Al, plugging into a 120 outlet, how far could you run an extension cord before you?
Well, I mean, it's not rocket science really to know that the longer the extension cord, the more resistance you're going to have and the more heat loss, and it's not going to be as efficient. And, so I would just recommend against it in terms of just electrical safety and in terms of efficiency. And that's really it. And I loved your answer to the first question, Charlie. Mm-hmm. Yes, you can plug it in the rain.
All right. And then there's this last question, the etiquette of unplugging someone at a public charging station. Phil, I think it looked like you were getting ready to respond to that one.
Yeah, that's a really, really complex question, much more complicated than people are aware. And I think a lot of it depends on the situation. Many people who, when they travel, will have a little sign that says, if I'm fully charged, it's okay to unplug. Next to where the charge plug is. Other people would get very, very unhappy with you, especially if you unplugged them before they were charged up to the extent they wanted to continue on their trip. There are a number of articles written on this topic, and we could refer people to those articles.
This is an evolving topic. I will say two things. One, the last time I did a DC fast charge in Electrify America stop, I was using their app, and their app will tell you when your charge is done, and then you should really go back. And in fact, it'll tell you you need to unplug and move your car within 10 minutes, or we're going to charge you more for still sitting there. So I think that kind of technology is coming and will be enforcing moving your car and that this will become maybe less of an issue. I think right now it probably is a little bit of an issue with people plugging their cars and walking away and not coming back for a long time. And I do think it becomes difficult, but this doesn't happen very much. The times I have been at DC fast chargers lately, I have been the only one sitting there. There have been like 4 or 5 stalls, and I've been the only car there. And I've done this a few times in the last 3 months. And right now, the pressure on the DC fast chargers is not high, and they're looking to install a lot more of them. In fact, the Biden administration has been in the news these past few days. The impending Biden administration talking about incentivizing the deployment of tens of thousands of new chargers nationwide. And I think we if that moves forward, we may be well ahead of the curve in terms of having plenty of DC fast charging capability.
Right.
And Ingrid asked, can other people see how full your charge is? And yes, at these DC fast charging pumps, you can actually, there's a screen there that tells you where your charge is at.
And some cars actually have a couple of lights or something on the dashboard that tell you that too.
Yes.
So they're easy to do.
But the handiest thing is these apps, which will stay in touch with your car and the charging equipment, and you will know when your car is charged, and you should go back and move it. So you don't have to. You can go out for lunch and then go back when it's ready to go.
Can we go back briefly to Newt's question?
Sure.
I think it's a really important point. The Lane County just in the last few days put out a study on the local carbon emissions. And they told us that by far and away, the largest carbon emission issue energy-wise comes from vehicle transportation. So that's part of it. But if you're thinking about general efficiency for your house, probably among the best thing you can do, especially if you're in an old house, is to insulate the thing, close up all the cracks. If you can afford it, replace single pane windows and those kind of things. Get rid of the gas furnace and buy one of the modern modern electric heat pump systems. And that goes in spades if you're buying heating oil. I mean, these are the kinds of things that can make a difference. But the biggest difference around here, at least, still is gasoline and diesel used in cars.
That does seem to be what the data shows. Ron, would you like to add it? You sit on both sides of this. You deal with the houses as well as the cars.
Yeah, I deal with electrification and efficiency. So I would say that, yes, the most cost-effective way to reduce emissions is reduction in energy usage. And that comes from efficiency within that building, whether it's a house, industrial, or commercial building. I would add that, I'm sorry, Phil, but windows do not necessarily give you a great return on energy reduction.
I'm aware of that. Yeah, you're right.
They improve comfort. They look nice. If you're going from double pane to triple pane or double pane metal windows to vinyl, the efficiency increase and reduction of energy usage is not much. But insulating the home, looking at upgrading to a ductless heat pump if you have resistance heating. And I would say to talk to your local utility, because every utility in this area has great programs to help you reduce energy. And we can still do energy audits, though they may be virtual. So that is a great way to reduce energy, and it's pretty cost effective. On the limited income side, we pretty much offer free ductless heat pumps for those who qualify for those income guidelines, as well as free insulation if you qualify. So there's great opportunities. And for non-limited income, we also have really good incentives and rebates. So yeah, talk to your local utility, whatever that may be, and learn more about that.
Thanks.
All right.
I did not know about those rebates. That's really valuable.
Before doing anything energy related around your house or your car, it's worth looking at the EWEB website. Juan, thanks so much. And I have one more question here. We're going to make this the last one, and then we're going to wind up here. It's from Susanna, who says, I can't charge my car at home. I only drive about 15 miles a day. Is it realistic I can find level 2 charging around town to fill my car? And my offhand answer is yes, it's realistic, but I think it's worth considering. I think I think it's worth doing a little bit of research to make sure there's some dynamic or logistic that will work for you there. But if you only go 15 miles a day, you probably won't need to charge more than once a week. And the question is there a convenient level 2 charger that somewhere near where you work, perhaps, that you could use that once a week when you want to charge it up? And you can get an app like PlugShare and go ahead and put it on your phone and then check out, where are those chargers? Do they cost me anything to use? Does this look like something that would work for me? Juan, it looks like maybe you had a thought on this.
Yeah, thank you, Charlie, for noticing my hand. I would say when I bought my car and I have a level 2 charger, the City of Eugene has such a great network of charging stations. And if you go after parking hours, regular business hours, they're free pretty much. And so I would say look at the network that the City of Eugene has. It's fantastic, and you can get some free charging. Go do something on the weekend and charge your vehicle. So yeah, definitely, they're a great resource.
Looks like Merlin wants to say something as well.
Well, I was just going to add a little bit to Evan's questions earlier about the 110 on a extension cord. We did that for a few weeks when our driveway was being reconstructed. We just did level 1 with an extension cord, parked the car out at the curb, and we average the pretty typical about 40 miles a day, and we were able to fully charge with the 110 overnight using that extension cord. A little bit heavier extension cord than my normal ones, but that worked fine. We didn't have any interruptions of the charge during that few weeks we did that. So I think that's very possible.
Oh, great. Thanks, Marlon. Good. Someone with experience on that. Evan's also asking that he's noticed the City of Eugene has some free charging stations around town. Does EWEB have free charging? Larapa, where Merlin works, does. How about EWEB, Juan?
Yeah, so it seems like I should take that question. So EWEB offers rebates for commercial charging, so including anybody who wants to put at the city. We have public charging. We have 4 public charging stations, but at the time when we went into agreement with that, we went with Blink charging. And so they set the pricing on those. And unfortunately, I think it's like 39 cents a kilowatt hour, which is much higher than our 9 point and change cents per kilowatt hour on the residential side. So one thing that we're doing, and we have now the stage actually that being delivered. So we acquire our own stations so we can upgrade those and then remove those and put, we're still determining what the pricing structure would be, but it's definitely going to be, it's not going to be 39 cents, something very reasonable. I don't know if they will be free, but we also consider clean fuel credits. So we're still looking at the pricing situation, but it's going to be something considerably less, definitely under 10 cents a kilowatt hour, or perhaps even lower than that. It's something reasonable. But currently we don't have any free charging stations, again, because they're not ours yet.
All right. Thanks, Juan. Well, we've lost almost our entire audience here. Thank you to all those of you who stayed to the very end, but I think we'll make that the last question. As I mentioned before, we'll be posting a recording of this to the EVEVA.org website under events. And you'll be getting an email from us with a bunch of links to useful resources, including some of these places where you can continue asking your questions, whether to EVEVA's Ask an Owner or to EWEB's Electrifies. Good luck finding your electric car. I'll turn this back over to Phil for any closing remark.
Very, very briefly, I simply want to repeat my thanks to our partners, the City of Eugene, Eugene Water and Electric Board, and the University of Oregon Office of Sustainability. Working together, we help educate the community about the values of electrification of transportation. And we certainly appreciate everyone who came tonight, and especially those who stayed to the bitter end at 8:50. Thanks a lot.
All right. Good night, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Good night, all.